Assalamu alaikum. To recap what we were doing in the last lecture, if you remember, we were talking about Francis Bacon's essays. The first one that we did was of truth. Today we're going to do of marriage and single life. If you remember from what I said yesterday and in the first lecture, Francis Bacon wrote on a number of different topics. He had a wide variety of topics to choose from, and in view of the singular position that he occupied as a courtier during the times of Queen Elizabeth I and King James I, he had the opportunity to explore and to talk about a number of different topics concerned with different aspects of life. Moving on from of truth to marriage and single life, we go on to Bacon's ideas and his perspectives of an aspect of life that has been discussed by philosophers, by poets, and by writers from different areas of life, and each one has given his or her own points of view. Let's see what Bacon has to say about marriage and single life. Now he starts off by saying, "He that hath wife and children hath given hostages to fortune, for they are impediments to great enterprises, either of virtue or mischief." If you remember from what I told you when we were discussing Bacon's essayistic style, I emphasized the fact that Bacon uses slightly old English, and that in no way detracts or takes away from the efficiency and the command that he has over the language, and in fact it adds to the beauty of the language, the way in which he uses words that are not used anymore, or the way he uses spellings of certain words that are not current anymore. So when he says "he that hath wife," you will remember that the TH has been replaced by the S. So the th sound has been replaced by the s sound. So the word hath has been replaced by has. If you were to be writing in the present age, you would say "he that has wife and children," not as Bacon does, "he that hath wife and children hath given hostages to fortune." Now fortune here is used in a slightly different sense from how it is normally used in contemporary English. When Bacon says that a man who is married and has children has given hostages to fortune, he's talking in one sense of how a wife and children can be used by other people to blackmail you. Let's suppose you take a stand over a particular topic, or you take a stand over a particular issue. Now, as long as you are alone, you can take a stand and you don't have to worry about the safety and security of those who are near and dear to you. And in the case of married men, and we have to remember that Bacon is talking solely about men and not about women so much. So he talks about men who have wives and children and giving hostages to fortune, giving hostages to luck. And what he's trying to say here is that if you have a wife and children, these wives and children can be used to influence you. Now, the phrase hostages to fortune is used in a number of different ways. When he says that a married man has given hostages to fortune, he is actually referring to the fact that wives and children can influence you in manners that you would not really think of otherwise. For they are impediments to great enterprises, either of virtue or mischief. Now Bacon gives you points to support and points against an issue. So when he talks about a great enterprise, he's not just talking about positive things. He's not just talking about spreading messages of peace and happiness. He's also talking about enterprises of mischief. If you have taken up a cause whereby you want to spread mischief, your wife and children can be used to influence your judgment. So one of the most important statements and one of the lines that are very frequently quoted when we talk about Bacon's essayistic style is the line that begins this essay of marriage and single life. And he says, "He that hath wife and children hath given hostages to fortune." This portion is very frequently quoted, and you will find this in a number of books of quotation. You'll find this on website and web pages which give important quotes from the English language. So Bacon's contribution to the English language cannot and has not been duplicated. He is among the few greats of the English language. So you will not just find his name in English literature, but you'll also find out how he gave conciseness to the English language. And his contributions in writing are such that they can neither be ignored nor avoided by a student of literature. And you, as students of literature and linguistics, have to be made aware of the significance of Bacon's contribution to the cause of English language and literature. So coming back to the essay of marriage and single life, he says, "He that hath wife and children hath given hostages to fortune, for they are impediments to great enterprises, either of virtue or mischief." So anything big that you have planned, it's always best if you do it single-handedly. If you are a single person and you are not influenced by a wife and children. And for those of you who think that there are times when you can ignore this influence, well, I would say that you've not really had experience of married life, because a spouse, and I say spouse because when we talk about married life, we're talking about both husbands and wives. So spouses and children can affect you in ways that a single individual cannot imagine. You can't even think in your wildest dreams the ways in which your spouse and your children can influence your decision, can influence if you decide to take a stand on an issue. So certainly the best works and of greatest merit for the public have proceeded from the unmarried or childless men, which both in affection and means have married and endowed the public. Now you hear about various people who talk about having married a cause or having taken up a cause for which they work devotedly. They have to spend time, they have to spend money. It is the focus of all their attention. So when you talk about a cause or an issue having your total attention and in acquiring or needing a lot of money to be spent on it, obviously you cannot afford a family. You can't afford family life if you have a great cause to which you want to devote your life and which you would like to be known as your cause even after you are gone. Bacon's ideas on marriage and single life stem from his experience, from his knowledge of the world around him. Remember, he belongs to the Renaissance age, and this was an age that is known for the revival of learning, for an explosion of knowledge in various fields: art, literature, geography, the sciences, astronomy, name it and you have it. There was this explosion of knowledge, this explosion of information that people brought in from different areas of life. You had people from England going off and discovering new lands. You have people like Francis Drake vanquishing the Spanish Armada and bringing back limitless wealth. You have people like Columbus traveling from Spain and going to discover the new world. Now that opened up a whole host of possibilities for Europeans. So Bacon, coming from the age of Renaissance, is full of ideas. There are times when he takes up an idea that has been discussed very frequently and he gives it a totally new twist. He gives it a perspective that you could not have imagined. For example, this idea that he brings in, that he that hath a wife and children hath given hostages to fortune. A very simple, a very basic idea. Married versus single life. Those of my students who are married will realize the time and attention and money that married life entails, and which was all yours until the day you decided to get married. Those of you who are single can afford to spend time, money, attention on anything that interests you. It's a totally different thing for those students who may happen to be married. So moving on from hostages to fortune, Bacon says that the best works and those that are known to the public are those that have been carried out either by single men or by those who were childless. Now, being childless and married is not an enviable position, and yet it allows you to work for a cause. It allows you to work on an issue with a singular devotion, with concentration and focus. You have time to yourself. You have money for yourself. And you are not bothered by routine issues like such and such a child has to have school fees paid, has to be taken to school, has to be washed, dressed, made ready for school or for bed, has to have food prepared for it. Those are things that you don't have to worry about when you do not have child or when you are single. Now that's not to say that I am advocating against marriage or against children. What we're talking about right now is that the important work that has been done throughout the history of mankind has either been done by single men or by those who were childless. Now, going back to the age in which we place Bacon, the Renaissance age, the age of Queen Elizabeth I. If you remember from your history of England, Queen Elizabeth I did not get married. That's not to say she did not have sufficient number of proposals. That's not to say that there were not men around who were willing to marry her. She had a whole host of admirers. She had countless proposals from her half-sister, Queen Mary I's husband, Philip II of Spain, down to her own courtiers. She was a beautiful woman. She was the most powerful woman in England. So there were a lot of people who were willing to marry her. There were a lot of politicians who advised her to get married because they wanted England to be stronger. And Philip II's proposal was the strongest because they wanted Spain and England united. And since they had been united in her sister's time, for a very short time, what they wanted was for this this unity, this union, to face the rest of Europe. They wanted this union so that England would not stand alone. So Queen Elizabeth I did not get married. And you see how England progressed during her time. Drake and the others invaded the Spanish Armada. They brought back wealth to England. Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh went out to explore new worlds, went out to look for wealth, anything that would benefit England. And the single most beneficial act, the single most profitable event was the defeat of the Spanish Armada. So the time in which Bacon was living was the time when his monarch was single and childless. And he saw how England progressed during that time. He saw the impact that England made as a country on the map of Europe. So when he says that the best works and of greatest merit for the public have proceeded from the unmarried or childless men, you can also take this sentence to read unmarried and childless women, particularly when we think about Queen Elizabeth I. So, which both in affection and means have married and endowed the public. So it's like you marry a cause. You don't marry a human being, you marry a cause, and you devote all your time, all your attention and focus to that one cause. And there are no hindrances from family. And when we talk about family, we're talking about family in the nuclear system, what you would call perhaps the American system, where you have a husband, wife, and children. That is the nuclear family. So when Bacon says that the greatest works for the benefit of public have been done by those who are unmarried or those who are married but childless, what he's trying to emphasize is that men particularly who are not hindered by a wife and children can concentrate wholeheartedly on whatever they have decided to do with their lives. All these great works, these works that have benefited the public, have been carried out by single men or by men who were married and yet were childless. And the best example that you have is that of Queen Elizabeth I, since we're talking about Francis Bacon's essayistic style, and we know that Bacon is a Renaissance writer who started his career from the time of Queen Elizabeth I, and Queen Elizabeth I did not get married. She ruled for a number of years, and she was able to make treaties. She was a very, very worldly wise woman, and she did not say she would not get married, because England didn't want to stand alone. England needed the support of its own people as well as the support of the countries around it, the countries that surrounded it in Europe. So Elizabeth did not say no to any one of her suitors, and mind you, she had a number of them, because one, she was Queen of England, two, she was a very beautiful woman, and by virtue of being beautiful and by being Queen of England, she was one of the most powerful women of her time. She was also the daughter of Henry VIII, so as such she had diplomacy and politics in her blood. So she kept everyone hanging. She was sure that their single-hearted devotion was to her, and then she kept on saying, yes, I will get married, I just have to choose. But she never did get round to choosing, so she killed two birds with one stone. She not only kept everyone happy and everyone expectant, but she also remained single and was therefore able to devote all her time and energy to working for the realm. So these are people who are thought to have married and endowed the public. They are married to a cause. If you think about people who take up a cause, for example, you take up the issue of people who take religious orders, people like nuns, for example, who are not allowed by the church to marry or to have children. They are able then to devote all their time and attention to working for the masses. So you have these nuns working in school, you have them working in hospitals, all their time and attention is devoted to working for the general public. And then he moves on from the point where he says that the greatest works for the public have been done by men who are single or men who do not have children. And he says, yet it were great reason that those that have children should have greatest care of future times, unto which they know they must transmit their dearest pledges. Now, that's not to say that men who have families have no stake in the future. Men who are married, and particularly those who have children, from Bacon's point of view, have a greater stake in the future. They have taken on the responsibility of human beings who will follow them, human beings who will live long after they are gone. So from Bacon's point of view, when you say that a man who has a wife and children does not have a stake in the future, that's not so. In fact, his stake in the future is possibly greater than that of a single individual, because once that individual is dead and gone, that's it. He doesn't have to worry about his name being taken after he's dead. He doesn't have to worry about work that he may have done to live after him. He does the work that he wants to, he gives it all his time and attention, and that's it. He dies, his work may live on after him, it may not. With a married man and with a man who has children, there are greater chances that whatever a man is doing, he is doing for the benefit of his wife and children. He has a stake in their futures. He's taken on the responsibility of a wife, he's taken on the responsibility of providing for children, and he must do it. So from that point of view, you would say that an individual who has a wife and children would find more reason, would find more ways to contribute to public life. But you do not find that to be so. As he said earlier, all great works, all works that benefit the public maximum have been done either by single men or by men who are childless. All right? So he says that men, logically speaking, men who have a wife and children have a greater stake in their future, have more reason to work for the benefit of mankind, because he has taken on the responsibility of a wife and children. He has sworn to provide for them, he has sworn to protect them from all harm. And so logically speaking, such a person should be able to do more for the good of the general public than a man who is single or a man who is childless. And then he gives you a totally different idea. And he says, some there are who, though they lead a single life, yet their thoughts do end with themselves, and account future times impertinences. Nay, there are some other that account wife and children but as bills of charge. Now that's something that you need to think about. Single men who are selfish, who live for the present, who have no care for the future. Such men also exist in our lives. Men who are interested in the present moment and who do not want to work for the future simply because they will not be there. So the height of selfishness. I'm here, I don't have a spouse, I don't have children, so my life is focused on providing for myself, looking after my interests, making sure that my position is secure. What then am I contributing? That's the question that Bacon throws out at his readers. Now he doesn't do this directly, he doesn't give us a question, but he provides us with a situation, and it is up to us to understand what the question is and what is its significance. So some there are who, though they lead a single life, yet their thoughts to end with themselves and account future times impertinence. Now people who are worried only about themselves and who don't have a spouse and children are individuals who do not want to think about the future. And they don't want to think about the future because they have no one for whom they have to plan. They have no one for whom they have to show care. They have no one on whom to lavish their attention. So they work only for themselves. They work only for the present moment. And not only do they work for the present moment, but they think that people who work for the future are, forgive the expression, idiots. Idiots who are thinking on planning for a time when they will not be there. So why plan? That is the point of view that such selfish people hold. When I am not here, why should I worry about the time when I will not be there? I need to work for the time that I am here. I need to work for myself. So selfishness at its highest point. And this selfishness is taken so far that a wife and children are thought to be debts that they need to pay. Bacon's talking about marriage and single life, and he says that there are some people who are so selfish that they would think of a wife and children as something that involves a lot of expense. He refers to them as bills of charge, and bills of charge are bills that have to be paid. So what he's trying to say is that a wife and children are indication of a number of bills that have to be paid. Well, that's true, but then that's not the only thing that having a wife and children entails. It's much more than just paying bills all your life. But that, of course, is the point of view, as Bacon gives, of a selfish man, a man who thinks that he should reserve all his time and attention and money for himself and not spend it on a self other than his own. Nay more, there are some foolish, rich, covetous men that take a pride in having no children because they may be thought so much the richer. Okay, now let's deal with this point first. He says there are some people who are so rich and yet so greedy that they take pride in having no children because their society or their community would consider a single man to be more rich than one who has money but who also has wife and children, because such people, that is, people who think that single men are richer, such people would think that this man has a lot of money, but he also has a wife and he also has a big family, so he needs to spend money on those people also. Thus, he is not as rich as he pretends to be. Now, that's a point of view that is totally selfish and materialistic. Selfish in the sense that you want to be known as a rich man. It's not sufficient that you are a rich person, but that you must be known as a rich person. And this is only true, as Bacon says, of men who are rich and who are covetous, who are not satisfied with the wealth that they already have. They always want more because they want to be known as the richest man in the world. There's a race in which they have entered, and this is a race for the greatest amount of wealth that an individual can possess. And so, like you have the magazine Forbes, I think it is, that publishes a list of 500 of the world's richest men. So maybe these are people who would like to have their names in the Forbes magazine. But that's about all that they do get out of these riches that they continue to acquire, and riches which are never sufficient for them. And these people, Bacon classifies, and you see how he brings in different categories. He brings in categories of men who are single, men who are married but childless, men who have children, and men who are childless through choice, not because the Almighty has not blessed them with children, but because they do not want to have children. And their single reason for not wanting to have children is so that they can enjoy all the wealth that they have acquired and that they continue to acquire. Such people, he says, have probably heard some talk that such an one is a great rich man, and another accept to it, yea, but he hath a great charge of children, as if it were an abatement to his riches. So these people, when they plan not to have children, do it probably, and here Bacon offers you probabilities. He gives you ideas which might be true, which might not be. So what he's doing is, he's giving you choice. And the choice that he gives is that people who plan not to have children or who take pride in not having children have probably heard other people saying, oh, you know, so-and-so is a very rich man, and so-and-so is also a very rich man. But, you know, this second man has children, and this children is spoken with such a voice and such a tone that you feel as if it's a great crime that has been committed. You know, it's a sin that has been committed. Oh, he has children, like he has monsters. But that's the kind of people that do exist in this world. That's the kind of people that are there in our environment. People who think that a man is rich only if he is unmarried, or if at the most he is married, he must not have children, because children mean that a man will never be able to accumulate wealth. So from their point of view, a man is wealthy only if he has a lot of money and he is alone. He does not have anyone around him. So they talk about children as if children detract from riches. Children detract from wealth. Now you and I know that that is not so. Children are a blessing themselves. Children are the wealth that the Almighty, the Divine Being, has blessed human beings with. They're not to be considered an abatement to riches. But then we're talking about Bacon, Bacon's point of view, and Bacon's point of view as it has emerged from his knowledge and his experience. So don't think it to be my point of view. Don't say our professor said we must not have children, because if we have children, then we will not have money. That's not my personal point of view. What I'm trying to tell you is a part, a portion, a section of Bacon's philosophy. And remember, Bacon had a lot of experience. He had a lot of knowledge for a man of his age. He was knowledgeable in many different fields. And whatever we are doing now is the essence of his experience and his knowledge of many different fields of life. But the most ordinary cause of a single life is liberty, especially in certain self-pleasing and humorous minds, which are so sensible of every restraint, as they will go near to think their girdles and garters to be bonds and shackles. Oh my God. Now, there's a third category of people who advocate the cause of a single life, people who go around telling other people, don't get married. Do not on any account get married. Don't take on responsibility. And the reason is, they say, well, you know, your liberty will be at stake. You will not have freedom of expression anymore. You will not have freedom of movement anymore. Yes, such people do exist in our lives. Such people existed in Bacon's environment, in Bacon's society, the community that he lived in. So he says the most common cause that single men advocate is that of liberty. So he's talking about men who think that single life is a freer life. But these are people who would take what Bacon refers to as girdles and garters to be bonds and shackles, who would take their clothes to be a means of imprisonment. Now, clothes are meant to beautify the human body, not just to cover it. So those of you who like dressing up know that if you wear a particular style of dress, a particular color, you look good or you look better than at other times. But people who think that a wife and children will imprison you are the kind of people who would take the dress to be a means of imprisonment. Unmarried men are best friends, best masters, best servants, but not always best subjects. And there you have Bacon's point of view. For they are light to run away, and almost all fugitives are of that condition. A single life doth well with churchmen, for charity will hardly water the ground where it must first fill a pool. All right. Now this statement needs to be very carefully examined and explained. Unmarried men are best friends, best masters, best servants, but not always best subjects. Now, this subject is not like the course that you are studying right now. This subject is used in the sense of an individual who is the citizen of a country, an individual who is working for a cause. So when Bacon says unmarried men are best friends, he's talking about an aspect of life where he places unmarried men on one hand and married men and men with children on the other. And he says that they are best friends. Yes, a married man will have other commitments, will not be able to give all your time. So an unmarried man, according to Bacon, can be the best of friends, can be the best of masters, because you have to serve only him and not his family. So those of us who live in the Pakistani family system, or those of us who live in the joint family system, will realize how true this statement is when Bacon says unmarried men are best friends, best masters, best servants. You don't want a whole family cluttering up your household when you want to employ one individual to do the cleaning or the cooking or the washing or the ironing or 1,001 other things. You always want a single individual. And if you bring this statement to the present times and we try to contextualize it, we will see that not just men, it is also true of women. If you have a single woman, she will make the best servant. If you have a maid who has a husband who does not work, who has children who need to be fed and taken to school and provided for, she will not make the best of servants. So a single woman will make the best of servants, but not always best subjects. And Bacon stresses this point because he says, for they are light to run away. You don't want a subject to run away. You want your subject to stay and serve you. And it's not difficult for a single man to run away. It's very difficult for a man with a family to disappear from a country. So when he's talking about subjects, he's talking about Englishmen. He's talking about courtiers who were serving during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. Single men, it would be very easy to run away. It would be very easy to disappear. And almost all fugitives are of that condition. Take a look through history and you will find out that fugitives are always, almost always, single men. And then he goes on to explain his point further, and he says, a single life doth well with churchmen. Churchmen, because when you devote your life to the cause of religion, then it has to be single-minded devotion. Then there can be no disturbances, there can be no interferences. So a single life doth well with churchmen, because one of the most important causes, one of the pillars on which any religion rests is charity. Charity in the Christian church, charity in Islam, charity in Hinduism, charity in all beliefs, all faiths across the world, across history, across time. That is what is important. That is what forms the basis of any religious belief. Charity, sharing what you have with other people. And the reason Bacon gives for churchmen having to be single is because he says, when you spread charity, when you give out charity, it will hardly water the ground where it must first fill a pool. So you see what he's doing is, he's taking the wife and family to be like a pool that needs to be filled, and on the other hand, you have this dry ground where a little water is sufficient. You know, when you're watering the ground, you sprinkle a little water, and that's enough. But that same water is not going to be enough if you are asked to fill a pool. A pool is going to need gallons of water. So for a single man, it's easy to be charitable. It's easy to be a churchman. It's easy to devote his life to the cause of religion. It's not so easy to devote his life to the cause of religion when he has a wife and children. All right, let me recap what we have done today. We've not been able to finish this essay on of marriage and single life I'm hoping that we'll be able to do it in the next lecture, but let us just go back over some of the points that Bacon has made and some of the points that I have tried to emphasize in today's lecture. So what Bacon does is he gives you two types of men, two broad categories of men, that is unmarried men and married men. And then he further divides those categories. There are unmarried men who are unmarried through choice. There are married men who have children and who are childless. So you have two categories of married men, and you have two categories of single people. One who are single through choice, one who have not perhaps found a partner that they want to share lives with or that they want to take on the responsibility of. And then he gives further characteristics, and he says there are some men who are single through choice because they take a pride in being known as rich men. They're not interested in being known as a rich family. They're interested in being known as the richest man on earth. And so they choose not to get married. And then there are other people who are single because they think that getting married is like getting involved with other people, and it's the end to all your freedom. So such men are in a totally different category. Married men who have no children, according to Bacon, have made the greatest contributions to public welfare. Although married men with children are those that have the greatest stake in the future. They have people that they have taken the responsibility of. They have people that they have to provide for. They have people that they have to protect from everything else in this world, outside this world. So logically speaking, those men who are married and who have children should make the greatest contribution. But history tells us that it is either single men or married men with no children who have made the greatest contribution to the most wonderful causes that mankind has been able to come up with. So they've been able to contribute to the service of humanity because they are either single or they are married, but they have no children. Because children, they think, are a kind of baggage, you know. The term that is used these days is baggage. It's a very current term, and it's used in the sense of something that just sort of burdens you down, not just with expense, but physically, mentally also. It takes up your attention, it takes up your time. And then at the very conclusion, I pointed out that Bacon's philosophy is that unmarried men are wonderful friends, wonderful masters, wonderful servants, but not wonderful subjects, because any time that things become tough for them in their country, they will run away. And then he goes on to say that all fugitives are single men. Thank you very much for being so patient with me, and we'll continue this in the next lecture. So our next lecture is going to start off with Bacon's essay of marriage and single life. Allah Hafiz.